Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Business Strategy Roundtable. Excited to welcome my new friend, Sumati, the CEO and founder of Ladle-Cooking, who was just informing me about uh, why people don't cook more and what they're afraid of. So I'm going to just dive right in. Thank you for being here. And what are people afraid of with cooking?
Well, nice to see you, Zach. Yes, actually, the biggest thing that stops people from cooking is confidence, right? The confidence that what they're going to make is going to turn out right. And one of the biggest things people are afraid of cooking at home is steak, for example. So,
Yeah.
steak is actually a very simple thing to cook, but nobody wants to have a steak well done when you want it, when you want it rare or you want it medium rare. And the important thing is people want to be told how to do it so the result is something they're going to be happy with, right? So think about you spend an hour cooking something and then it tastes kind of so-so or yuck or whatever. And you're like, my goodness, what happened here, right? So if you can actually help people with the ability to easily cook what they love, that is a big plus.
Absolutely. I heard you say steak, and I've my flashed into my mind's eye into the Costco, looking at the steaks that I would love to purchase, but I don't right now because I'm a founder and an entrepreneur. So I don't want to mess up a steak that costs me
Yeah.
however much a pound. Like I've cooked steaks and I know how to do it, but I don't want that risk. Now imagine somebody that's in not as good a financial situation, maybe isn't an entrepreneur, but maybe has, kids, X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
That risk of making a meal and spending that time when what if the kids don't eat it? What if we waste all this? Like that's people confidence is important when it comes to really anything, whether it be cooking or training somebody or running a business, because it's what allows you to go further out from an experiential perspective to try more things.
Yep, agreed. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what we're really trying to do, I mean, I think today, as you talk about AI and cooking, right? I think we've come a long way, right? I'll be honest. And I think you know a little bit about my background, but just for you to
We're
know,
going to find out more. We're going to find out a whole bunch more in this first half.
so I used to work for Alexa, right? I was in the smart home division and I was responsible for strategy and go to market for a number of our solutions. You have heard of Alexa turn on the lights, right? I was responsible for building that ecosystem. And even at that time, and this is only about 4 or 5 years ago, Zach, it was much more cumbersome. It took more time. So, for example, for Alexa to go from speaking American English, right, to speaking Canadian English was like a major endeavor, right? We did have AI, but it wasn't where we are today. And I think the biggest shift that has happened with generative AI specifically in the tech world, it's different from what we call classical versus generative, but the newer version of AI that you're seeing now, we do have models who have been pre-trained on a lot of cooking data, right? Now, all of that is not accurate out of a box, which is why somebody like Ladle has done a lot of work. But the truth really is we do have the ability today to provide a personalized experience to you, Zach, based on what you want to cook versus Sumiti and what I want to cook versus my son Ryan, who's a Gen Z who wants to cook differently, right? We can really do that and we can actually do it in a easy, automated, but step-by-step way so you have the confidence that your steak is going to turn out the way you want it to be.
I love that, and you've motivated me to dive into what is generally the main focus of the first part of our podcast here, which is the entrepreneurial journey and how you got to where you are now. So it sounds like you have a detailed background as it relates in technology, particularly successful technology organizations, and applying artificial intelligence as a system to technology. Could you talk a little bit more about how you got into that part of your career, and then I'll kind of ask some questions about how you chose to go into the cooking world with the technology.
So how much time do you have for this one? I want to make sure that I am answering your question. I can talk about this for quite a while, but I want to
Well,
make sure that I'm keeping it focused and not just giving you a long story.
yeah.
Uh,
I'd love we typically take the first 30 minutes to explore
yeah,
who you are as an entrepreneur.
yeah.
So, if we go plus or minus around that range, I think that we'd leave everybody happy.
All right, so that's really helpful. So thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Um, my journey is a little bit unusual, right? So I am originally from India. I came to go to school here to get my bachelor's. And interestingly enough, I came to go to school to get a bachelor's from India to the US in graphic design, which was actually pretty unusual for my time. And, my family didn't quite understand because, as you probably know, most Indians go into science and math, right? You got a lot of, Indian engineers, and I just wanted something different. I wanted something. I'm a pretty right brain, left brain kind of person, and I need to use both sides of my brain. And I wanted something that was creative, something that was a little more different. Interestingly enough, I ended up going and getting a bachelor's in graphic design. And then I got a master's in computer graphics and graphic design. Um, and shortly afterwards, fell in love, got married, moved to San Francisco. And interestingly enough, San Francisco for the last several years has become a tech mecca, right? So moving to San Francisco, initially I thought I was going to work for a cute little boutique design firm. But as it turned out, technology was evolving, and we had things called multimedia, and the internet took over. So really, most of my career, actually all of my career, has been in technology. I am not a coder, I'm not an engineer, but I have really focused on, being part of a lot of strategic initiatives. So you can talk about anything from cloud to e-commerce to, IoT and smart home. I initially started out as a designer, actually helping my ex's company initially. He was building a design company that I helped with, and then I went and worked with a number of different companies. But eventually, what happened is I realized I wanted to do something more. And what I did is I went to get my MBA. And having worked in technology gave me a really deep understanding of technology. My design background and my creativity helped me think out of a box. But then getting my MBA was really helpful for somebody like me because I tend to be pretty structured and I also tend to be pretty analytical, right? So, what the MBA did was help me understand, okay, what am I building? Why am I building? And how do I go out building that, right? And so then that really helped me get those three sides I call the triangle, right? I'm sorry.
Oh, I love triangles.
Yeah, the triangle, right? The three pieces of the triangle. And since then, I've actually worked for different companies, most companies in big tech. You probably know names of companies like HP. And then I went to work for Intel, which was completely different. Big initiative to build out their ecosystem for all the no wires things they were trying to do. So the whole idea then was people weren't buying laptops as frequently, right? I guess they were happy with the way the laptop was functioning. So, if you think about a chip company that makes money through laptops, it's like, how do we get people to buy more laptops? So the whole idea was to add, interesting features and services. And I built out their worldwide ecosystem for solutions like wireless charging. Um, that was actually pretty cool because that was my first experience of taking a concept, a new disruptive solution. Okay, we're going to enable wireless charging, right? And we're going to enable that in airports, we're going to enable that in hotels, we're going to enable that in restaurants, new technology. And basically, I built the ecosystem of enabling that. So, having that technology ready, having the strategy for it, having the partnerships with companies like Emirates and Marriott and Hilton, and having that across basically actually all over the world except Latin America. And That taught me a lot about building things from scratch, being also scrappy, because oftentimes people think if you work for a big company, you have all the money and all the resources. And the truth is, that's not true, right? Especially in large companies, that's not true. Especially when you're building something that is more nascent, you have to build fast and you have to be really thoughtful, but also put things together fast. And this was hardware, right? We were building wireless charging, these things which were adapters, right? That actually had to allow you. So, for example, if you were at the bar at the Marriott, right? You were at the bar there, you had this little charger thing sitting, and you could put your phone and charge it. At that time, the technology wasn't quite there. And we were building it, we were not building it at Intel. So even though I had to build the ecosystem for it, I didn't have a product. So, but I still had a goal to be able to do 50 pilots all over the world, including all over Europe and China and everywhere else. So the point was, when I didn't have the technology available within the company, I had to get the different companies to build the software, to build the hardware, to get the FCC to give us approval and get 50 pilots by the end of the year. And was quite a formidable actually goal. But that goal went all the way to Brian Krasanich, who was the CEO at Intel at that time. So I didn't have any flexibility on, the fact that, you met your goal or you didn't meet your goal. It was actually pretty simple. But the path to get there was tough and convoluted, but it was actually really amazing to see that when my team came out and we came at 54 pilots to a goal of 50, through all the hoops that we jumped, taught me a lot about just believing and persistence in follow through, right? Um, that was actually, even when I talk about it, I kind of get goosebumps about it because it was quite a ride for 12 months. Um, but then, anything, I think, once you have certain experiences, they just make you stronger, right? Can start to see, hey, okay, well, what was hard yesterday is not hard today. And then I got an opportunity to go work for Amazon for Alexa, in the smart home division. And what was really actually fantastic, because before I went to work for Intel, I didn't know a lot about hardware. I did not know how the devices worked, because I had been more on the strategy side, more on the software side. But Intel taught me a lot about, because again, the chips have to go into whether they're chargers or laptops or phones, and you've got to figure out how those devices work with software, which is basically enabling that, right? So when I came to Alexa, and I was really able to take my Intel experience, the Internet of Things experience, how software and hardware works together. Didn't hurt that we'd actually had a lot of these different adapters and chargers approved by the FCC. So I had to really get in the weeds of how those things function. So when I came to Intel, to build out our ecosystem for things like Alexa, turn on the lights, the all the smart home solutions to have your lights, lock thermostats, and all those things work. So you, as a person living in your home, could actually use Alexa more easily to create the environment and the experience you want in your home. And then we built a lot of things like Alexa Guard, which was taking voice and sound to be able to detect for intrusion events. Nonetheless, I took a lot of these solutions to market, and yeah, that was another level of scale, right? Because you're looking at solutions that are not just being used by millions of people, they're being used by hundreds of millions of people worldwide, right? So it was quite an experience, and yeah. Um, so after doing that, it was, I think, we all came to an interesting time in our lives called the pandemic. And before I get into the pandemic, I'm going to take a little sip of water and we can talk more about that.
Great. I've got a couple of other questions I'd love to kind of toss in here before we move into the cooking element of things, because I've got just a couple of questions that I think add to who you are as a person. I think are interesting perspectives to share with other potential or current entrepreneurs.
Okay,
So if you don't mind, I'd love to throw a couple of those at you.
please do.
Okay, thank you. So you're somebody who has, from my perspective, this is just a read, tremendous confidence, and it seems to be internal instead of external. When you were going through the early stages where you were doing something that was maybe atypical to what your community would expect, something more creative versus the STEM stuff, like you mentioned, you first had to kind of rebuke what was typical or expected of you then, and then you had success, found your way into a space, and then decided you wanted to do an MBA or an MBA, and you said, "I knew that I wanted to do more." Can you talk a little bit about what that feeling was like in the moment where you're like, "I could do more than this"? And I think that it's related to your confidence and your certainty of self. And I'm kind of curious if you think that those two things have anything to do with each other, or did you become certain of yourself as you went?
So the way I look at it, Zach, I'm a lifelong learner, right? I always embrace the fact that learning is a part of life, right? And I'm also the kind of person who takes risks, but I learn from the risks, right? So as I was doing things, I realized that there was something missing that I needed to learn more. One thing I will say is I do have a certain drive, and I've always had that. There's a certain drive that is that I'm someone and I matter and I want to do and build something. Uh, you can call it ambition, you can call it, some people say, my goodness, why don't you just chill out? I think we all just have to embrace who we are, right? And I'm also the kind of person who does not like to get stuck, right? So if I do something and realize, okay, well, I did this, but I only did it 60% or 70%, right? So when I was a designer and building things, and, at this time, like I said, I was helping my ex's company. I realized that a lot of things I didn't know, right? There were a lot of things happening in the macro world that made me realize that, listen, there's more information and knowledge out there than I know, right? And what I wanted to do is I wanted to go get that from people who could actually teach me that. Now, again, nobody teaches you anything that gives you a roadmap of your life, but it is important to go, for me at least, to go out to whether it's getting more education or reaching out to other people who know more so I can learn from them. And mostly when I look back at my MBA, I think it's not really, I don't even remember most of the stuff I was taught there. I think the two things I got, which one was a network, right? So like-minded people trying to do similar things, and we support each other. And I ended up going to USC, and there's actually a very good network of people. People support each other, and um, honestly, a lot of what you do in life is who you know versus what you know, right? And the ability that you support people and they support you is really helpful. The other thing I found helpful is in the business world to really kind of understand the lingo, right? What is the language that people are talking? And how do I talk in that language so people can understand? It's good to have ideas, but in the business world, when you can put it in a framework that most people understand. So I got that vocabulary, right? And together with those two things, it gave me more confidence than I had before. I will be honest that I do tend to have certain level of drive and a certain level of confidence, but it has been a process to consistently build that. And I think that also comes from the ability to put myself in situations that scare me. Um, a long time ago, a friend of mine said to me, fearless doesn't mean you become fearless. You just fear less. So, you've got to go into a situation with fear in your belly, but you've got to put yourself out there, because 9 out of 10 times, even failure will teach you something, right? And I think that's the most important thing. That's what I tell my children. It's like don't be afraid of the no's in life, right? Because you will get a lot of them. And if you're afraid of the no's, then you're always going to stay in a safe zone. And for somebody like me who's a lifelong learner, uh, being in the safe zone is inertia for me. And I don't like that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. It pulls you in. Well, thank you for that. I could talk too long about that topic, so I'm going to hit some of these other questions that I have here. But thank you for sharing that. Um, One thing that you mentioned was the tenacity, and being able to get through. We've got to get to 50. We've got to get to our goal. We've got all these issues. I think that is something. I think tenacity and confidence and will all kind of go together and are tremendous entrepreneurial skills. You're talking about working in these organizations that are more technically forward, where they're moving quickly, which is kind of startup like.
Mhm.
And then you also kind of took that experience and then parlayed it into the Alexa world, where a lot of what you're doing is rolling out new initiatives or new applications of technology. That's kind of startup esque as well.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about getting that experience without being entrepreneurially forward, kind of having the experience of startup and forced tenacity without the risk, and then how it's benefited you
Mhm.
going into what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. Thanks, Zach. Yeah, I mean, if both the positions, right? So both Intel and with Alexa, I was responsible for taking new disruptive solutions to market, right? In each case, the product was not there, right? In the case of Intel, we had a product that was being developed but was way behind, so I really could not use that product at all, right? New disruptive solutions, saying, hey, how do we make this happen? Similarly with Alexa, but let me start with the Intel example because this was really, really new, right? You've got a hardware company, you've got a chip company. It's not a company that's really focused on building end-to-end customer solutions, right? We're trying to build these chargers. Originally, the idea was to build them for laptops because Intel is a laptop company. But this, in the world of technology, you've got something called standards, right? You have to actually get the standards body to okay the standards, and then the technology is built using those standards. So we're part of a new standard for wireless charging called resonance. We were trying to build that for laptops and new technology. The hardware wasn't there for it, the software wasn't there for it. So it was pretty much blue sky, blue ocean. And it's like at the same time, I came on board. I was new at Intel. My goals were, hey, you have to build these 50 pilots worldwide. It's your strategy. You've got to figure it out, and you've got to do the implementation around the world. And it was a really challenging situation to be in, but it taught me how to think quickly because the given was I tested the waters to say, hey, do we have any flexibility, right? Because, coming in January, February, as I found out that we did not have a viable product, I tried to find out if that I had any flexibility about meeting my goals because I had to have both the hardware, the software working together in having all these partnerships with some big partners, right? I mean, think about hotels like Marriott and Hilton and companies like, airlines like United and Emirates. And we were talking to some of the key airports and restaurants. I mean, lots of different companies, big companies, right? The advantage is I was coming from Intel, right? So it's different. Like, trying to create a partnership with a big company from Intel is a different experience, right? People talk to you, at least at that time, Intel had a really big reputation, right? So, um, but it was a new disruptive solution. And I think even though the challenge was pretty great, how do you build this? What do you do? I had to figure out, I started out with 2 people. I ended up actually building out a team of 50 people over the year, but really kind of figuring out, okay, what are we building? What is the strategy? What are the products? If we don't have this internally, what are the third party? Because we've got to get other companies, right? We've got to get hardware companies to build this. We've got to get software companies to build this. If we're doing this ecosystem worldwide, which is, think about US, Europe, and China as the key countries. So, how do we build partly in the US? How do we build in China? So I had parallel work streams happening across, both sides because, as approvals in the US are happening through FCC, you have a similar body in China, and, having all those pieces moving. So it was being incredibly strategic, being able to pivot consistently, being nimble, and just pushing forward. Um, and interestingly enough, we didn't have a lot of funding for this initiative, even though it had very high visibility. As I mentioned to you, it was the baby of the SVP at Intel, and visibility. And he was a direct report to our CEO. So I actually was in bi-weekly meetings, showcasing where we were in our progress. The interesting thing also was because we didn't have enough funding, I also learned to then work with capital bodies like Intel Capital, right? I had to go to them to get funding to fund companies so they could build the solution we needed, right? So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, literally, because a lot of the companies that were building the hardware we would want or the software we would want, they were startups, right? New technology, they were startups.
And if the initiative, forgive me for cutting you off, but I'm just kind of clarifying understanding. If the initiative for Intel didn't work, they don't want this whole arm of the business that's producing this thing that's going to go towards something that didn't work. So of course you need to have outsourced R&D almost in the way of startups.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
The only way I could build out the pilots and build out that ecosystem that year, Zach, was to go external.
Hmm.
Our own product development was delayed by at least 6 months or 9 months. And if I waited for that, then after that to get the FCC certification, because you develop it, you get the certification for it, you then integrate software. I had a year, right? And so I think the biggest thing I did there was figure out what's plan B, right? Let's pivot quickly. Let's put another plan in place. And actually, not just plan B. I had plan B and plan C, and I also had a plan D, right? It's like, uh, and for everything, we were finding multiple software companies in the US, multiple software companies in China, and similarly for hardware companies. So I had multiple people we were reaching out to, and at the same time, building out. And think about this: as you're building this technology, which doesn't exist today, I'm building out partnerships with these companies like Marriott and Hilton, and asking them to allow us, when we have the technology available, to allow us to go to market with them.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm going to give you a pretty funny story here, which is funny now. It is what was not funny then. So, the first hotel we were doing a pilot with in July was the Marriott. So Marriott has one of their prime hotels in Sunnyvale, right? So they were pretty close to the Intel office. I talked to them as the first hotel we would go live with. And we had built out a relationship with them. They were going to showcase that at their bar, in bedrooms, and gyms, and the lobby, in a few places, right? So we had the hardware. We had this company built out the chargers, and we'd already realized by now, because the technology was early enough, that laptops required a lot more space, right, to build the technology. Phones had a smaller space, so we were going to go to market with enabling this for phones. And we get the whole setup. So we had to get installations. So, there had to be electrical installations, because if you think about a bar table, right? If you think about at a Marriott, the bar table, you had to have the installer installed. We had electricity. So, we had the system integrator install electricity and these chargers and everything. And there's a big, marketing push. And we're going to go live next week. And what we'd also done is, myself and my team, we had installed these chargers on our tables because we were piloting them internally before we went out. And one of the people on my team calls me and said, "Hey, I had a credit card I left on on the charger by mistake, and it burnt a little bit. So when these chargers get too warm,
Oh.
it can burn somebody's phone or something that's on the charger, right? And think about this. Yeah, we're going live tomorrow, next week with Marriott. We've got marketing, and
And real estate is where all their money's invested. So
yep.
fire and real estate don't love each other. Those two things.
So here I am, so this is my account manager, because she's responsible for the Marriott partnership. She's like, what should we do? Should we, and again, it doesn't happen with everyone, it happens in 1 in 10 or whatever it is, should we be open about it, and should we pull things back for now, or should we just go ahead with it, right? So important thing, I had to really think about it. I sat down with a couple people and had a really deep conversation about this, and it was painful. Honestly, it was pretty gut wrenching at that time. But and the gal who was, I had a gal at that time, Ciricia, she was fantastic. She was on that account. So there were two things. One, should we be honest with the partner, right? And the answer was yes. We need to be honest with them. We need to tell them what the solution, what is happening right now, right? And the next thing was empowering Ciricia to actually have the conversation versus me taking it over and saying, I'm going to talk to the partner about it, right? Because we had to talk to their whole leadership team and other people, right? So, and it's like, okay, well, I'll be on the call with you, but you can do this, we'll prep for it, we'll have this conversation, and we'll also come back with what is our mitigation, right? What are we doing to mitigate this, right? Because you don't want to just go and say, hey, the chargers are burning 1 in 10, and we're going to pull this out, but really thinking about, okay, what is it that we can do? What are we doing to solve it? And honestly, Zach, in that particular case, I didn't have a timeline to give them. It's like, this is not working right now. Can we have it for you in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks? I don't know. And that's when I learned that, you ask for people for a time, meaning I will get back to you in 2 weeks, and we will let you know then as to, what the timeline should be, right? And this was, it seemed at that time like a pretty big move, right? Because at the end of the day, nobody else was going to be able to make that decision for me. I was responsible for this, and really helps you understand what accountability is. And yeah, and Sarissa did a good job, and honestly, that turned out well. And while it was painful at that time, I think what it does do is build that trust and respect, right? Because then the partner knows that you're not pulling, wool over their eyes. They trust you, and after a few weeks, we were able to just build over that. Slowly, we were able to build that, and they knew it was new technology, right? They knew that they wanted to unveil something that was new, but nobody understands unless you're a technology company how new that is, right? Because so it took a while. It took a while to rebuild that relationship and get things back where they felt confident and we felt confident to rectify that. But anyway, so that's kind of when you're going out with disruptive new solutions, when you're working for a big company, yes, you get a paycheck, so that is a good thing. You know that at least, especially if you're producing results, right? And that's the other thing, right? Because with all the disruption that you've got with technology, technology companies really expect you to meet goals, right? If you're not meeting goals, then there is no security there, and that's kind of the way it is. You've got to, but you get a paycheck. But again, if you're doing something that is this disruptive, to be able to meet those goals, you have to be able to think fast. You have to be able to take chances. You have to be honest and open, and you just have to, trust things and keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want us to transition now into cooking, and we'll kind of hit a couple of different things here. And we can go over a little bit if your schedule allows, and if it doesn't, we'll just have to continue the conversation another time. But I'd like us to start with what how food is important to entrepreneurs first, because we usually talk in the second half about a business strategy that relates to entrepreneurship. I think food uh, falls into the category of like fitness as a business strategy. Um, so if you could talk a little bit about that, and then feel free to share what sparked, uh, you know, going into this space as an entrepreneur. I would love to hear those two things from you, and then we'll hit
Um,
this. We'll do this too. We'll officially mark the transition into topic of the day.
okay. Um, so food, personally for me, I am a flavor nut, right? I've always liked flavor in food, but both as a person, as an entrepreneur, I really understand how food and fitness are connected. I am very particular about what I eat. I mean, I know that, I start my morning, I have a macchiato, but then I'm done with coffee for the rest of the day, right? I am very cognizant about both exercise, both for physical fitness, but also for mental fitness, right? It's one of I run regularly, I go to the gym regularly. And the important thing with that is, if you realize how much your well-being, whether it's mental or physical, really actually impacts your ability to create and produce, it it has a direct correlation, right? And I think the biggest enabler of that is what you eat. And I think more and more, I know that younger people are trying to figure this out, but I think it's really important to understand how your body functions, right? I mean, I've gotten to a point where I know, how my gut feels, how my body feels, how my energy level feels. I know that when I come back from the gym and I've used up, 500 calories, that if I come and make that smoothie and add the protein and blah, 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 and I have that within 20 minutes, I'm going to be able to then really refresh and refuel and be able to get into that meeting, 20 minutes later, and I'll be doing really well. Or I can go at night and have a couple of drinks, and the next morning I'm feeling drained, right? So really understanding, food and different food groups. And we are very fortunate, right? We're living in a time when you have an overabundance of things available to you, right? And that's also one of the big reasons why people are overweight and obese. But more than that, overabundance doesn't mean it is good for you, right? And a simple example is, we come from a background where people, you eat a couple carrots, but you can have a whole bunch of carrot juice all squished into this little uh, bottle. And if you think about how your body performs, what you I've talked to so many people about this, Zach. I've talked to thousands of people, and people who become more mindful about what they're eating, they can actually tell you what they eat and how that makes them feel and how that impacts their day. So, and I know for me personally, when I'm traveling and I've eaten out 3 or 4 days in a row, I don't have control over my body anymore. I don't have,
Mm,
I start getting, and this is my allergies right now. We're in the middle of allergy season,
right.
but I get really sluggish. I get tired. The biggest thing is, blood sugar and getting irritable and all those things. And I think the funny thing is those things are very easily rectifiable by what you eat. And we're also in a society where we believe, oh, we're just going to add supplements, right? We're just going to take vitamins and do this and do that and other things. The truth really is your body doesn't process it the same way, right? And so you have um, things like insulin, inflammation, and other stuff, and your body just doesn't process it that way. So really, and again, in the world of being an entrepreneur, right, what you need is not just tenacity. I typically pull 15-hour days, right? That's not unusual for me. I work at least 6 days a week, and I work long hours. and being able to, and a lot of it is focused work, right? Because it's not just logistical work, it's a lot of focused work. And being able to do that and being able to do that well requires me to eat really healthy, requires me to get the sleep I need, and requires me to be mentally and physically fit. So yeah, so that I believe I really do think food has a lot to do with it.
I completely agree. Thank you for sharing your perspective there. Talk to me about how you went from what I imagine was kind of a fun job, maybe cushy job in the Alexa world to I'm going to take on the entrepreneurial beast and build something new.
Yeah, it's funny because people ask me, well, did you just decide to start Ladle because you love to cook? And I said, no, actually, you know what? It's not that simple. You don't one day say, hey, like you said, I have a cushy job that pays me well. And even though I'm taking risks, I still get a decent paycheck. And to say, hey, I'm just going to build a startup, it's a pretty big leap. So let me tell you, Ladle is actually the result of a personal pain point for me. So I have a son, Ryan, who has a lot of food allergies. So over the years, it's been quite a challenge. It's been a real challenge to actually be able to provide him food that was healthy, safe, but also delicious, right? Because stuff that he would eat. And this is not just for one thing, right? It's not just for one meal. It's like every soccer practice, every birthday party, everything, right? Dairy, nuts, and all those things are things he can't eat. So, how do I provide that? How do I give him options? And it's been a big challenge. And what I realized, having worked with some of these big companies, and during the pandemic, right? So there's a pandemic, and I think a lot of us started to do some soul searching, right? Okay, what am I doing? Where's my life going? Where's my career going? What am I passionate about? One of the things that ends up also happening working for big companies is so much of your time gets spent on getting people to agree. So much of your time gets spent on managing up, right? And I was going through that phase. Suddenly, everybody was back home. I was there. My husband was there. My sons came back from college, and all of us cooped up. So that was an important time to say, okay, what do I really want to do? What makes me get up in the morning, right? How am I excited? So I really started thinking about, okay. I was like, okay, what do I want to do? Do I really want to get another job and work at a FANG company and spend? And I was interviewing with a number of companies, and I actually had somebody pretty senior at one of these companies say to me, "You don't want to come work for us. You're too smart and too ambitious to do this." And it just like made me think, like, yeah, I really don't want to do that. And I do care about the fact. So yes, it's a personal pain point, but I started to do some research, and sometimes it's also right time in the right place, right? And all that stuff with generative AI that happened in November 22, right? Like we've got these models, we're able to do this, that, and the other. I also was fortunate to go overseas and did a trip around the world, talked to a bunch of people, talked to a lot of young folks, and realized that a lot of people, um, are cooking more, right? Millennials and Gen Zs, over 60% want to cook at home more. And, most of them are getting their inspiration from creators, right? You think about all, I mean, you tell me, when you want to cook something, where are you getting your inspiration?
Well, it so I have a list of things that I want to learn from experience. Like, so I love Thai food and I love Indian food and I love Mexican food, but it's not as spicy as Thai and Indian because I love spicy food. So I have a list of. I just learned Szechuan chicken
Oh,
uh,
wow.
after messing up the sauce probably 5 times and getting really frustrated. And I messed up a chicken tikka masala. But I guess the answer to the question is experientially. So I have something that I really like, and then I put it on my list to learn how to cook. But the other answer is on TikTok. because I enjoy cooking, and the universe knows that, my algorithm knows, my Alexa knows that. I get the feedback into TikTok, and I have like a cooking. You know how you can save them and
Mhm.
organize them. I have a
Right.
cooking section, and
Mhm.
if ever I'm like, with somebody that I'm dating, like, hey, let's try something new, or like thinking to myself, like, hey, let's try something new. I'll go through it and find ones that I want to try. Um, so that's typical for me.
Okay.
What about you?
Well, that is typical for most people, by the way, and especially if you are Gen Z and millennials. And we're focusing on the younger population because, again, with the new technology solution, it's always easier to go with people who are more technophiles and then make it easier. And I guess part of me is also trying to help people like my sons to cook more. But it is true. So most people, especially in that demographics, they get inspiration from creators, right? On TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram. But you know what's really interesting, Zach? Only 1% of that content is used to cook with. It really gets to be entertainment.
Mm,
So people watch it. They watch it for entertainment. It's like the home remodeling show, right? You're like, hey, this is really cool, but they don't use it to cook with, right? So I think what we are trying to do
right.
with Ladle is, uh, I'm building an ecosystem, right? So one side is people, who want to cook, right? And as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to make it easier for them. We're trying to make it about you, what you want to cook, whether it is what portion size is, your diets, your health goals, the appliances in your kitchen, and all those different things. But we're also pulling in creators, right? We're pulling in creators.
Mm,
One of our creators is this gentleman called Chris. His handle is at Caribbean Pot, and he's got over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And we're pulling in these different creators and we're taking their content. So, people are already excited about them, right? They're following them. You've got all these people like, Internet Shaquille and Binging Babish and all these others. We're working with them, building partnerships with them, taking their recipes and allowing people to personalize that based on their preferences. And you said something very interesting there where you said, you like really spicy, right? But there are people who don't. So this is a conversation I have with Chris all the time. And it's like, why are you? He's like, Sivati, I want to cook Caribbean food. He started his company building it to actually help teach his daughters, right? Because they're now in Canada and he wants his daughters to know how to cook Caribbean food. But the thing that we talk about is that while you want people who want to cook it the exact way it is, we've got a lot of people who kind of want to cook Caribbean food, but they don't want it to be that spicy, right? Or they don't have the same ingredients available here, or they're like, I want that fusion version because that's what we do, where we live, right? We want that version. It's like, okay, and so how do we make it possible for him to be able to increase his reach and be able to get different people who want to have whether Caribbean food or Caribbean flavored food. But so what we're doing is taking recipes from people like him and then helping people personalize it for their preferences.
I'm excited because we're all the way kind of back to where we started with the confidence thing. So the recipes, just getting a recipe or just seeing a TikTok, it's not enough, because you may be able to follow instructions, but actually having the knowledge of what you're cooking and
Mhm.
how what you're doing impacts the recipe are two different things.
Mhm.
I can follow instructions and get a result,
Mhm.
and then not be satisfied with the result because I don't know enough about the recipe I chose, or the culture and how they go about their foods, or even just because of uh, the types of spices that I chose being, from a more traditional place, where what I really needed to do was, go to a place that sells Thai spices, you know what I mean, or whatever it might be. When you have that experience of, well, I followed the recipe perfectly, but I didn't like it. It didn't taste the way it tasted at the restaurant, or it wasn't the experience that I was hoping for, or I and my wife liked it, but the kids didn't. You know what I mean? Like whatever it might be, if you don't have the depth of knowledge to adjust, you may
Mm-hmm.
not feel comfortable doing it again. And that's where I think solutions like yours and technology in general are changing the world of cooking, because that access to information is more than it's ever been.
Correct.
Where if I mess up my chicken tikka masala recipe, I can go to ChatGPT and say, well, how did I fuck this up? How did it turn out so bad? And it can help me troubleshoot. Where if I just go to the recipe, and I have to
Mhm.
like get rid of like all the ads that are on the recipe websites or whatever, the TikToks are fast. If I just go to that, it's my knowledge, it's me and me. But with something like what you're describing or other technology solutions, you've got the support to close the knowledge gap and become comfortable and confident.
Yeah, and here's the difference, but you're exactly right, right? Because if you're following, if it takes a while, especially like your example, right? You're trying to get to do your chicken tikka masala perfectly for you, right? And first, it's doing it a few times to get the confidence, right? That okay, I did this, and I mean, I wanted more chili here, or it really wasn't chili. I wanted more. There's a different flavor profile, right? And it's not just whether it's spicy, right? Spicy heat level and spice level are different, but also the different, spices and things like that. And I think what makes Ladle little different, I mean, I think ChatGPT can help you some, but at the same time, what we found with ChatGPT, Zach, was the level of accuracy we got it with it was 75%, right? Because there's still um, a lot of accuracy it did not have. And
It's
one
not
of
its
the
specific focus,
yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think the thing that we ended up doing, and we spent a number of months doing it, is two things. So on the platform side, we spend a lot of time really putting in number of data sets to actually make the algorithm smarter, right? In terms of, data about this should go with this, should go with this, right? Really informing it with a lot of more data to get it to be more accurate. The other piece we did is partner with people, right? We are partnering with people like, for example, Chris, Caribbean Pot, right? So, like when he's doing his class the other day, he's talking to people about Scotch bonnet peppers, right? And he's talking about the fact that that's typical what goes into, he was doing, I believe, a curry shrimp.
Mm.
And he was talking about the fact that Scott bonnet peppers, they have this flavor profile and blah, blah, blah. But then people were asking him questions, right? As he was cooking, we were taking questions and people were asking him. And he was able to give them different variations and talk about the flavor profile of the pepper and how there are other things, looking at the North American, what is available in North America, what are the other things that you can do and what are the mixes, how can you kind of do that and what are the pros and cons of the different things you use. So I really think that, and in addition, what happens is, but we take his recipes, for example, like we have this jerk chicken that or jerk turkey for Thanksgiving that he had.
Mm.
He created the kind of personalizations you could do. So it wasn't randomly, he actually was very specific that, okay, you can do this with brining, you can do extra spicy, and what are the different variations and how do you control those levels, right? So really being able to have the guardrails so that as a novice who doesn't understand the flavor profile of that cuisine and those spices, you have those guardrails and you can experiment within them, but you still get a dish that you're going to enjoy and you're going to trust that the outcome is something that you are happy with. Now, it's very possible that you experiment and you come up with an outcome. It's like, okay, well, it's a little bit more this, and I want a little bit less this, and that's fine. I mean, but at the same time, what you get is something which is pretty decent and you feel good about, versus getting something that's just going to taste, that's going to leave you really frustrated.
Right, right. I think from my perspective, technology is improving the world of cooking in another way. I
Okay.
think there are a lot of folks that either are uneducated about general macronutritional elements, which we kind of already discussed. There's a subset of people that are maybe sensitive to certain foods,
Mhm.
um, whether they don't want X, Y, and Z, or whether they have an allergy to a certain food, or
Mhm.
whether they need a certain food in their diet. Like, I'm waking up in the middle of the night and eating ice cream. You need more fats towards the end of your day. I don't know if anybody's specific on that. Uh, but whatever it might be, I think technology can kind of impact those things and kind of level the playing field for,
Mhm.
well, I want to be able to cook, but I'm allergic to this, or I want to be able to, I don't know, I am having this happening, and I want to solve it, or I'm not getting enough protein in my diet because I'm a vegetarian and I need more protein. I
Mhm.
think technology is like bringing us all to the table, pun intended,
Mhm.
uh, from that perspective. And I'd like your perspective on it.
So yeah, actually, Ladle is a recipe personalization platform, right? So whether that is you are a cook at different levels, right, from in terms of novice to expert, or you're somebody who wants to cook exactly what you want to eat, right? So that could be that you're choosing to eat differently, right? As you know, a lot of people are tending to eat more vegan and vegetarian and other diets, right? They feel that feels better to them. So flexism is on the rise. In fact, I think in the US, over one-sixth of people are choosing to eat differently than they were raised eating, right? They're choosing different diets. And the other thing that you mentioned was allergies, right? And allergies actually, interestingly enough, are on the rise. I mean, one of the simple things that people tend to do often is when they're eating vegan or vegetarian, they tend to switch to a lot of soy products. And, soy has actually a higher rate of allergies now than it used to be because it's not something that is typical for a lot of people in North America to have a lot of soy. But nonetheless, like my example of my son who has a lot of food allergies, right? It's like so. That is what Ladle is actually really, really focusing on is the ability for you to cook different meals, different recipes based on your preferences. So it can go from an ingredient level, right? So you can say, hey, this dish has garlic. I don't want to use garlic. Or, it's got white onions. I want red onions to, there's this, it's a beef chili and I want to make it vegan or vegetarian or gluten-free or, you know, that level of it, right? Really being able to, and to be really honest, Zach, we need to make that possible. Think about it. I mean, I remember going to Europe last year, and it's very difficult to be vegetarian in Europe, right? Walking down Paris, really out of the menu of how many things, you basically get one dish you could possibly have. And that should not really be that difficult. And oftentimes it is. It's like, what do I substitute for what, right? So if you can make that easy for people so they can understand that, okay, well, I have a dairy allergy or I'm lactose intolerant, I can't have dairy. So what is it, I can do? How do I make this? I want to have this flan, right? I want to make this flan. I want to eat this. How do I make it? And what are my options? And there should be more than just one option. So, one could be cashew based flan, but the other option really could be to, use other alternative products to be able to make that. So really with what we're doing with Ladle, the ability for you to personalize that based on your diets is very easy, including, for example, your goals, your health goals could be, you can say, hey, I just came back from the gym. I need to refresh and refuel. What do I eat? Or, I want to look good for the summer and, what do I need to eat? Or, I want to be heart healthy, or I could be, so there could be lots of different things. But yeah, that's exactly what we are really good at, is allowing you to be able to personalize that just for you.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to ask you one more question here. What's the future look like for Ladle? I know that um, some things you may not be able to share. I know you're on the forefront of some new and inventive or innovative technologies and in an interesting space. So, what can you share with us about where you guys are headed, and where do you want to take this thing?
So right now my focus is I'm building a dual platform, right? So I am trying to get people to use our app. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we have a whole new app refresh. So there will be a nice, beautiful new interface, So we're taking it from being more of a techie looking app, mobile first web app, to being, it's going to be a really beautiful design and everything. So we're getting more users on there. We've also started a paid subscription. And at the same time, as I'm mentioning to we're getting creators on board, right? We're creating partnerships, we're bringing more creators on board, as well as creating partnerships with these kitchen appliance companies, kitchen ingredient
Ah,
companies, right? We're also enabling ordering recipes, basically ordering ingredients from Instacart. So we're really building out, honestly, Zach, the ecosystem that I have been putting different pieces in place over the last 12 months is starting to build, right? We're starting to build that. We're starting to add more language capabilities. So this year, you'll see us move away from not just focusing on the US, but starting to move towards Europe and Asia and other language capabilities, right? Moving away from a chatbot and an agent that is more text based to being more voice based, doing more stuff with images, and so taking a recipe, say for example, taking a picture and saying what does it make, or different things, being able to do different things with images. So on one side, we're trying to have more users. So if you have communities that could benefit from using our app, please let us know. Would love to make that. Uh, right now, we're also giving very healthy discounts on that. But we're also actually talking to a lot of really big companies who are innovative and want us to actually provide that, whether it is, within their e-commerce sites or integrated into their applications, their home kitchen, the kitchen appliances and things like that. And the other thing I am really focusing right now is on fundraising, because to build the kind of scale we need to build, right? I have been very fortunate that I've been able to bootstrap the company for till now, but now I'm really actually just really started recently started fundraising. So that's going to be, raising more money to build scale and take this out in the real world outside the US.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time, knowledge, and expertise with us. If you want to take a moment to let people who might be interested in trying out the solution or creating some kind of collaborative partnership with you, go ahead and take a moment, and then we'll wrap up our Tuesday podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you for that opportunity, Zach. So, if you want to partner with us, please feel free to reach out to me. And that's Sumati, Sumati, at ladle.cooking. And please, our app, it is a mobile first web app, and that is available at app.ladle.cooking. And would love to have you guys try it out. And please feel free to give us feedback. Would love to be able to bring this and make it available for people who want to cook, want to get better at what they cook, and to cook exactly what they love. And thank you, Zach. I really, really appreciate. This has been a real fun conversation, and I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to talk about, my journey and what I'm building, and a little bit more about Ladle.
Absolutely. This was a blast. We'll have to do it again sometime.
That's great. Thank you
Thank
so much. You have a great day. Okay.
you.
Cheers.
Cheers. And thank you so much for those who joined us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.